Hello, and welcome to today's Google Talk. My name is Jonathan Joa, and I'm today's moderator. I work as a technical program manager with Trust and Safety Cloud, where we fight abuse to both earn our customers' trust while keeping them safe. Today, I'd like to welcome Lee Tran. Lee is a personal friend of mine from university, where we studied at the Macaulay Honors College at CUNY Hunter. She ended up transferring and graduating from Columbia University with a degree in creative writing and linguistics. We'll be talking about her debut book, House of Sticks, a Memoir, which chronicles her family's journey from war-torn Vietnam to Queens in the 1990s, along with her struggle to both honor her heritage while defining her own identity in pursuit of her own personal version of the American dream. Hi, Lee. How's it going?
Hi, Jonathan. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's been a long time. It's been about 15 years since we last saw each other.
I know, yeah. So good to see you. And
Nice
now
to
you
meet
know
you.
so much about my life.
For real. So I gotta ask, how is it now that almost everyone you know knows about your entire life?
It's so interesting because I feel like there's this immense gap in what I know about people who have read my book and what they know about me. So it can be pretty hilarious to navigate in social situations. I'll start telling a story and I'll think to myself, oh, they've already read that in my book. So now I have to find, new stories to tell.
Well, we're still young and we have plenty of stories to
Yes,
create in the future. So that'll be good.
absolutely.
So when and why did you decide to write this memoir? Like, was there a specific moment or did this idea develop over time?
Well, that's a great question. I think it definitely occurred in stages. The seed was planted long ago, I think in high school in my English class, when I was searching for glimpses of myself in the pages of literature that I read. And the closest I could find was Pecola Breedlove from The Bluest Eye. I don't know if you had to read The Bluest Eye in high school, but I did, and it was about this little Black girl who yearned for a pair of new eyes because she thought that it would make her beautiful. She wanted blue eyes. And of course, with my deteriorating eyesight, I felt a kinship to Pecola, and reading about her moved me to tears. And it was the first time that I had ever cried from reading a book, and the first time that I understood the true power of words and the true power of representation. So that was the seed that planted my desire to become a writer. And over time, as life led me down these various paths, I somehow made it to Columbia and ended up graduating in fiction. So it's interesting that I majored in fiction, and I ended up writing, a book that's nonfiction. So there's a whole story with that, and it started when I guess I was in my second to last year of college, and I realized that I didn't have enough credits to graduate the following year. So a dear friend of mine who you've read about in the book, Pam, she found me this wonderful program, an 8-credit course at NYU to take that summer so I could supplement my credits. And I applied for the fiction department of the program. And one thing led to another. I didn't quite love the professor. So I asked to be transferred over to the nonfiction department, where I met Saeed Sarafazadeh, who was so incredible as a professor, so engaging, and it was clear that he loved the craft. So I took it upon myself to forward him some pages of my work from Columbia, and asked for his advice in terms of how I can improve as a writer. And he swiftly rejected me and said, "This is not a workshop, it's actually a seminar. So I can't take a look at your writing, but why don't you come to my office hours and we can discuss, what your goals are as a writer." So I did so, and I told him I was hopefully going to write a book one day that was loosely based on my life, and I wanted it to be a novel. And he asked me, what's so interesting about your life? So I told him, snippets here and there about being a nail salon technician, an immigrant, a refugee, all these things. And he looked at me, he said, "Lee, that's a great story. You should totally write this story." Um, And that was pretty much our meeting. And I went home with this, renewed sense of ambition. And I think either the next day or the next week, his agent emails me and says, "Dear Lee, Saeed forwarded us your pages. We would love to represent you." So anyway, that was a really long story. I apologize.
Oh, that's awesome. That's incredible. Thanks
Yeah,
for sharing that.
of course.
So yeah, there are a lot of painful memories in this book. So as you mentioned, being forbidden to wear eyeglasses in your childhood despite desperately needing them. It also touches upon poverty, hunger, child labor, depression. So really, really hard, heavy hitting topics. But at the same time, you manage to capture a lot of hope and lightness in your writing. I'm just wondering, how was your process in balancing these two aspects of your story?
Oh gosh, it was a very difficult process, as you can imagine. A lot of trauma to sift through, a lot of understanding that I needed to reach in order to write this story. And as you can imagine, the ending of my book is not that long ago. So a lot of these events were really still fresh and recent. And the second or a few months after I graduated from Columbia, I received my book deal. So I had to, go from this place of trauma, from this place of darkness, and go straight into writing this book. So I needed a lot of time, a lot of distance. And it was only in really sitting with that darkness for a long time and really getting it all down onto the page that I was finally able to infuse the narrative with the light and hope that you see.
That's amazing. It's incredible. So I guess as speaking as a Chinese American, my parents were always kind of pushing me to become a doctor or a lawyer. And one of my mom's most used quotes was, "It's nicer to be sad and cry in a Ferrari versus crying without a roof over your head." And that's something she really, really repeated over and over again. So given your childhood working in a home sweatshop, was it a difficult decision deciding to pursue becoming an author versus a more stable income?
First of all, I love that quote that your mom told you. I think I'm going to use it. If I ever have children, I'm going to use it. But yeah, I don't think it was so much a decision to become a writer so much as a compulsion. It seems like throughout my life, there are all these paths, these roads that I walked on that led me to becoming a writer. Even not being able to see for so long meant that the only class I could do well in was English class because I was able to hold a book up to my eyes and read that way. Whereas, other classes I needed to really be able to see the board to write down the notes, which I couldn't do. And so from there, one thing would lead to another. I majored in neuroscience at one point at Hunter. You remember?
I do. I do.
Yeah. And that didn't work out for me. And so when I applied to Columbia, well, first of all, I applied to so many colleges after I dropped out of school, and Columbia was really the only school to accept me. And in my acceptance, when my interviewer called me over the phone to offer me a seat, she said that what really convinced the admissions board was my essay. And she recommended that if I hadn't considered pursuing a major in writing, that I should. And so, yeah, there are all these elements in my life that have really led me to becoming a writer. So, like I said, it wasn't really a decision, but more a compulsion.
That makes sense. That's really, really cool. Shifting gears, I guess I want to talk about your family. So you share some stories about your mother's mistreatment in the nail salon, especially growing up, working there very young, as well as your desire to fight back against that racial hatred and cruelty that she endured. How has the rise in anti-Asian American hate crime impacted her, as well as your desire to protect her?
Well, I got to say that the rise in anti-Asian hate crime has been really difficult for us. I think, especially when my parents were living in New York City, seeing all these incidents of violence against Asian Americans, and then, hearing about that shooting in the spa it was so triggering, and it brought back all these memories of us in the nail salon having to fight back against the abuse from clientele. And so, we would take these walks around Ridgewood, and I just remember trying to walk as close to her as possible, and just making sure that she felt safe. And then, she would also call me every day just to make sure that I was safe if I was ever out. So it's been definitely difficult for us, but I hope that the world becomes a kinder place, and that we can see from all of this exposure on the media that we are suffering, and that there are better ways to handle all this pain that we're feeling on a national and even global consciousness.
Yeah. It's been very, very difficult for my family as well. And I guess, it's a good thing that we live in the day and age where these things are recorded and shown across the world. And it's something that people can actually see what people have been experiencing for such a long time, including not just Asian American hate crime, but Black Lives Matter movement and a lot of other items as well.
Right.
So very, very topical. And I also wanted to ask you about your parents in terms of mental health and how older Asians definitely tend to view mental health as not something that exists. It's not like a topic of discussion. And I was curious about your opinion and how you think we can actually break down this barrier of this cultural barrier that doesn't really promote mental health as a necessity versus a nice to have.
Yeah, I think it ultimately boils down to the mere exposure effect. I think the more that we speak about mental health, the more people will start to feel comfortable with the idea. And I really hope that we continue to have these necessary conversations surrounding mental health, especially for the older generation. And really, I think this is pervasive across many cultures, not just Asian American cultures, but I think that, or at least I hope that we can usher in an age of healing and compassion, both for ourselves and others, because I think it is that we desperately need it. And I think my role as a writer is to bring as much of that on the page as possible to really contribute to these discussions.
Very cool, very cool. So in terms of your writing process, so you got your contract pretty much right after you graduated Columbia, and that must have been at this point, how many years ago was that? 60, so how long did it take you to write this book?
I think that was 8 years ago
8 years
now.
ago. Wow.
So yeah, it took me about 6 to 7 years to write this book. And the writing process was definitely a tricky one. And I wish I could say that I was disciplined. I wish I could say that I woke up early every morning at the crack of dawn to sit down to write, 2,000 words. But the truth is that I spent 5 years, tearing my hair out, crying in a corner of my room, trying to weave this tapestry of life, a very complicated life, that I barely had a chance to understand before I sat down to write it. But eventually, I learned quite a lot about myself through this process, and I was able to, at least I hope, channel that understanding onto the page.
What struck me in your writing was that it was so descriptive, even from your first moments in America. You remembered even the village. And how old were you when you came here? Like 4 years old? I don't
I was
remember
3.
anything. 3. Okay, well there you
Yeah.
go. I think
Yeah.
my earliest memory of my childhood is like, Mom, I want to be 4 years old, and she's just like, okay, cool, you're 4, I guess. I'm like, cool,
Oh.
nice. And that there's like I don't remember anything about the kitchen, or I guess I do remember it was at the kitchen, but
Yeah.
the amount of descriptions that you infuse into this book is incredible.
Thank you.
How did you like? Do you have just really good memory, or did you journal as a child? Like, were there any useful items that you leveraged to really reach into those early memories?
Absolutely. I think, well, first, I think I do have a good memory. I mean, trying to be modest, but I think I do. And Yeah, I think part of the reason I remember these memories from when I was 3 is because it was such a shock to my system. You know, coming from Vietnam and finding myself in a refugee camp and then coming straight to America. I think that shock is what really has preserved at least some of these memories from my early childhood. And then for the rest of it, I think I tried to really, through my style, my writing style, I'm not sure if you could see it on the page, but I tried to make the first few chapters seem sort of like in a dreamlike state. And it's because I really wanted to cue the reader into knowing that these are, very early memories of mine, and I can only provide these snapshots. And also later, as my vision deteriorated, I had to sort of shift how I was remembering these very fuzzy memories. So there is a noticeable lack of details the more that my narrative continues later on in my life, and that has to do with the way that I was seeing the world then.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that. And so you split your book into 5 parts, and within those 5 parts, there are chapters that range from very short, like 1-2 pages, to rather longer narratives. What made you decide to number one, split your book into 5 parts instead of having, like, 15-20 chapters? And yeah, how did you utilize those different pieces of writing and styles of writing to fit your narrative?
You know, when I first started to think about how I wanted to structure this book, I came up with this idea that I thought was super clever. I wanted to split the book, or to write the book in a series of vignettes that were conceptually linked to the manicure steps.
Ah,
So yeah, so the first step would be remove old nail polish, and it would be a set of chapters that were all based on sort of speaking about my father's past and sort of removing that past once we had gotten to America, to shed that past. And the second step would be cut, file, and buffer nails. And those chapters would be all about assimilation, because, to be as uniform as possible and to fit in with American society. And I really worked on this memoir with this conceit in mind for about 4 or 5 years. But the memoir itself wanted to be something bigger than that. And so it got to a point where that structure became suffocating in a way. And I had to ultimately let go of it. And it was really instrumental in helping me sort of figure out all the major themes and motifs of the memoir. And then once I had all the chapters, once I had let go of that structure and just wrote my story as a straight chronological narrative, that's when I sort of noticed these like natural breaks in the text that came out to these 5 parts. And I could even argue that those 5 parts would fit almost neatly into the steps of the manicure now. But I had already said goodbye to that. So here we are.
no, it's interesting. I feel like in any creative sort of profession, or not even profession, if you were doing it as a hobby, letting go is such a huge part of the creative process. So, and I will say, reading the book twice, the end result is very, very good. So I'm glad that you were
Thank
able to
you.
let go and create something better than you had planned. Or I don't know if you
Yeah.
maybe planned it out better time, but a very, very awesome product at the end of the day.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So yeah, you mentioned, your father, his PTSD, and being a refugee from the Vietnamese War. We're coming out of a pretty long, America's longest war, in War of Afghanistan, and I want to talk about your experience as a refugee. And throughout your childhood, essentially, there were several people who tried helping you, educators and guidance counselors. Excuse me. And there were several who had profoundly great impact on your life, and several who really derailed it in a not so great way. Can you talk about these experiences and just maybe gave some pitfalls to some well-intentioned viewers that they might want to avoid?
Absolutely. I think this is such an important question and one we need time to really examine. I mean, I have the utmost gratitude for all the well-meaning folks in my life who have tried to help me when I was down. But there were certainly instances that ended up being detrimental. And I think that's because there was an element of understanding that was missing from their intentions. And so I implore educators and advocates and anyone who wishes to lend a hand to immigrants or those they see suffering. Um, I hope that they can take the time to understand the people they're trying to help, take it on a case by case basis, and not apply some sort of just rule that they've learned to every single case, because it's just every single case is extremely complicated. So yeah, that's definitely what my advice would be.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you had mentioned that, my parents gave me that quote, and if you were to have kids, that's one you would use.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
how are you going to balance? Like, I mean, I don't know if you want to have children, no pressure either way. If you have that in your wants, but if you were to have kids, that balancing of family heritage and allowing someone to find their own way. Um, how would you advise parents and maybe new parents out here, um, to help guide their children and tell them that, hey, there are certain things that we need to respect from our culture and we want to pass that down, but also promote their own happiness and allow them to find their own way as well.
Yeah, I think to love your children and support them in their endeavors, and to understand that we live in a different age now, and to let go of this idea that your children have to be doctors or lawyers, and to younger viewers out there who are caught between, honoring their parents, while forging their own identities. I know that it might sound corny or cliche, but I implore you to follow your heart. Part of the message of my book is to look for the light within yourself, and to nurture that light in whatever form it takes. And so, for those who are struggling, please know that you're not alone, and that it takes a tremendous amount of courage to fight against what is expected of you versus what you truly want in your heart of hearts. So keep fighting that good fight, and I hope that parents who are watching this, please, just help your children nurture that light as well.
Are there any questions that you really appreciated getting from these interviews? I know that you've been doing a couple of these, all over, and promoting your book. So what kind of questions have you not answered yet, or that I've not asked yet, that you think would be a good one?
Oh, that's great. I think sometimes in the genre of memoir, there's not a lot of attention that is paid to the craft, and which is understandable because people are interested in this true life story, But I love answering questions about craft because I love the craft, and so anything having to do with authorial decisions that I've made to really bring the narrative to life. I love those types of questions, for sure.
And so you majored in fiction, and you decided to write this memoir due to your connection to your professor. Do you still plan on writing fiction in the future?
Absolutely. I'm working on a novel currently, and it's a historical fiction, and it has to do with the Trung sisters. I don't know if you know who the Trung sisters are, but this is a novel that's based in 40 AD, so super, historical. And it's during a time when this is, over centuries of Chinese domination, these two Vietnamese sisters, they join the army and they rise up in the ranks as generals, and together they lead the first successful revolt against the Chinese Imperial Army to take back Vietnam's independence. And then they reign as the first queens of Vietnam from 40 to 43 AD until they met their tragic demise. But I think it's such an incredible story, and one that really needs attention. And I think one that is also really topical in a way. It's so feminist, you know? So that's what I'm working on. And I hope that I have retained the lessons that I learned in, fiction while I was at Columbia to write this.
For sure. And I think in the beginning of your story, you infuse a lot of like that dreamlike state. Now that you're mentioning it, a lot of, I guess, do you think that a lot of your training in fiction has helped you shape that, influence that dreamlike state that you're trying to capture in your early story?
Yes, absolutely. And I wrote many of these chapters while I was in my fiction courses at Columbia. I wrote them I cast them in a fictional light initially, and so it was definitely interesting to transition from one genre to another. But also, I feel like it really informed my style too. And so I ended up with a memoir that was, although it's a memoir, it somewhat reads like fiction as well.
I mean, some of the things that happened to you, it seems like there's no way this happened to this person. This is not real life, but it is, and it's just such an amazing story. And I can totally see why your professors, once you gave him the cliff notes of your life story, he's like, "Yeah, no, that's a memoir. You need to write your story." So that's incredible.
Absolutely.
All
Thank
right,
you.
yeah, absolutely, no problem. And I do think we do have some questions here. Okay, cool. So one of them is, did you keep a journal when you were younger? The descriptions are so detailed and visual that it's incredible that you were able to capture so much of it.
Oh, thank you so much. I never kept a journal, but I think what I did was I told myself stories, and so it was through this act of storytelling that kept a lot of these memories alive for myself. And storytelling and myth making is such a big theme in my memoir. So it was a way for me to survive. It was my coping mechanism, and I'm so grateful for that coping mechanism because it really allowed me to tap into those moments in such an intimate way that I feel like I wouldn't have been able to otherwise.
Your story is about the myths of the turtle and, well, I don't know if it's a myth or real life because it's a little bit of both. Really, really
Yes.
incredible. And just wondering in terms of those kind of the Buddhism that your parents have passed on to you, do you plan on, again, going back to raising children? Maybe it's topical for me, but um, being, those kind of stories, do you plan on passing those on to your children one day?
If I have children, I'm still on the fence about it, but if not, then I plan on passing it on just through my writing, and through the um, hopefully many children who will be exposed to my writing as they grow up, for sure.
Would you be interested in writing? I don't know if there are many books about those kind of myths. Is that something you've ever thought about writing before?
Oh, absolutely, for sure.
Really cool
Um,
stuff.
yeah, I mean, I loved myths growing up, so it would be amazing if I could be the myth maker myself.
That would be really awesome.
Yeah.
We have another question here. Thanks for joining us, Lee. After writing your memoir and writing your life experiences, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, what advice would I give to my younger self? I think to be kind to myself. And that's so hard. Even to this day, it's so hard to be kind. We are our toughest critic. And so I feel like if I could meet my younger self, I would first give her a hug. I think she really desperately needed a hug. And I would tell her to just hang in there because things will ultimately work out for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, especially during this time of age where, second year, third year in pandemic, I think we're all a little hard on ourselves. And being kind to yourself is such an important thing, even for younger people as well as just everyone around. So good advice all around.
Definitely. Thank you.
Next question. What did you find the most difficult slash chapters to write?
Oh, hi, Joseph. For those of you who read my book, this is Joseph Vidal. This is the Joseph that I write about in the book. So hello, thank you for joining us and for this wonderful question. Oh gosh, the most difficult chapters. I think the most difficult chapters were the ones involving mental health, because I had to really be incredibly self-aware to really understand what was going on in my mind while I was ill, while I was really depressed. And so that took a lot of self-reflection and just sort of sifting through my trauma in order to be able to write it. So, yeah.
Awesome. I have one from Wendy Roldan. Going back to the point, you mentioned about having a good memory. What strategies do you leverage when writing as you bring these moments slash snippets to your life into a captivating narrative?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. Brings, I think, I just I use tense a lot in my memoir. I don't know if you noticed, but the tenses shift, and they all have to do with sort of the way that I was experiencing these particular memories when I went back to revisit them. So the memories that were more vivid, I would put in the present tense. And those memories, oftentimes were sort of towards the beginning because they're visually vivid too, is when I was better able to see in my life. And then, yeah, other memories that were really emotionally resonant, I would also put in the present tense, like my surgery. Oh gosh, I hope that wasn't a spoiler. I hope you've all read the book at this point. But yeah, so those are some of the stylistic strategies that I employed in order to really bring those memories to life on the page.
Yeah, no worries about spoilers. I mean, I'm hoping that it's not a spoiler, that your life's doing a little bit better than before. Improved a
Yes,
little bit.
yes,
So
for sure.
there is light at the end of a tunnel. So that's
Indeed.
pun intended, not intended, but sure. All right, next question. Shamara Contreras, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. When you wrote about your family, how did you go about that process to honor their truth and to perhaps manage their expectations on how you write about them, both positive and negative?
Oh, when I first started this memoir, I made sure to tell my parents and my brothers that this is the project that I'm working on, and I was very upfront, and I said I'm going to portray you all as the complex human beings that you all are, and that's what the narrative is going to be about. And I am so grateful to them for honoring that and for saying, my mother told me, it's okay, Lee, you do what you need to do. And so much support on their end. And I just, I went into this with the idea that I wasn't going to ask anyone for permission except for myself. The only permission I needed to write this stories would be coming from me. And so I approached it in that sense, but also with as much love and compassion, all the love and compassion that I have for them. And so this is the end result. And I hope that those reading can see just how much I love my family and how much they have contributed to my sense of self and my identity.
Have your brothers and parents had other family members or friends, rather, the friends of your family members read the book, and what has their response been?
Yeah, my brothers, I think two of them have read the memoir. No, I think they all have actually. And they've been really supportive. And I think the best feedback that I've received from not just my brothers, but from friends who have read the book, friends who are in the book who have read it. The best feedback is that I portrayed them in a very accurate way. They remembered the memories that I wrote down almost exactly the same way as I portrayed them. So that's just really gratifying to hear, for sure.
Not really a question, but a comment from Vanessa Nguyen. Looking forward to hear that novel about, or to read that novel about the Trung sisters. Need to drop off for a meeting, but enjoy this talk. I'm not going to try to pronounce the phrase here, but chuk, or I'm going to try. I'm going to slaughter it. Chuk mong namoi. Is that?
Oh, you did a great job.
Awesome,
Yeah.
great.
Well, chúc mừng năm mới, Vanessa Nguyen. Thank you so much for coming. I don't know if she's still here, but maybe she'll see this at a later time.
What
That
is chuk
means
mong
Happy
namoi?
Lunar New Year, or Happy 10th. Yeah,
Ah,
exactly. So Happy Lunar New Year to everyone here today.
did you get to celebrate with your family?
I did, and it's so wonderful. Yeah. I mean, one of my brothers is still in New York. I'm actually out in Washington. I don't know if I mentioned that, but my oldest brother, Tin, bought a house for my parents. And so this is a recent move, literally just last month. And this is, their first move since coming to America. So
Wow.
yeah, it's a really big move and such a departure from our little apartment that you all read about in Ridgewood. And now we are here in Renton, Washington. And it was really wonderful to reign in the new year with them.
That's awesome. Is there a big Vietnamese community out there in Washington?
Yes, such a big community. Everywhere we go, my parents are just so shocked to hear Vietnamese, people speaking around them. And I think it'll be a really good move for them. They'll find a sense of community, and they won't feel so alone as they did when they were in New York.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I got a question from Bridget Johnson. Thank you for writing such a powerful book. I listened to the audiobook version, which you narrated. What was your experience recording that audiobook?
Oh, thank you so much for listening. The audiobook has such a special place in my heart. And I think it's because voice, reclaiming my voice is such a big theme in my memoir. And so what better way to manifest that into reality than actually being able to narrate my own audiobook? And so, even stepping into just the recording studio that day, it was almost as if I was stepping into this sort of this place of worship. It was a place to honor my voice, and I so appreciated having the opportunity to do that.
Another question from Sikkim Patel. Memoirs are an opportunity to step into someone's life and experiences while also allowing us to examine our own. What memoirist, oof, that's a hard word to pronounce, do you admire, and what impact did their stories have on you?
Oh, that's a great question. I always recommend Maps to Anywhere by Bernard Cooper, and it was the way that Bernard Cooper wrote his memoir in this really incredibly poetic style, and the way that he plays around with truth and all the modulations of truth that we experience on a day-to-day basis. And I really wanted to tackle that in my own memoir, because I think that truth isn't just this static force. It's always changing based on, well, first who you are, where you are while you're experiencing whatever scene you're trying to write. And also what wisdom and insight do you bring into the act of remembering? And so I love Bernard Cooper's Maps to Anywhere. And I also love Vivian Gornick's Fierce Attachments, also an incredible memoirist and essayist. I love how just unapologetic she is when she writes. And so I too wanted to be unapologetic in my writing, and I really try to emulate that as much as possible.
Another question from Manisha Lambert. Writing about self is also opening about your own vulnerabilities to everyone. Did that bother you? How did you cope with it, if it does? By the way, kudos to you for writing this book.
Thank you so much. It doesn't bother me. I think I am somebody who I wear myself on my sleeves. And so the act of writing a memoir is just really like a reflection of how I live my life, And so I set out to write the memoir the way that I live my life, just to be as raw and vulnerable as possible. And I'm really I'm proud of myself for being able to do that.
Yeah, huge kudos to that. It takes a lot of courage to be able to write about such vulnerable topics, and I want to say I'm really proud of you too. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Next question from Kim Lin. As a Vietnamese woman with similar experiences, I am so inspired and moved by your words. How do you learn to heal from your trauma and be kinder to yourself? Chúc mừng năm mới.
Chúc mừng năm mới. I, thank you so much for your kind words. And, for me, I think healing is an ongoing process. And, they say that trauma changes your DNA even. There's been, a growing body of research that confirms that. And so for me, I think the act of writing is a way of healing for sure. I am a huge proponent of therapy, and just sometimes having that another voice, another voice of insight in the room with you is so helpful in terms of understanding yourself. And yeah, I think being kind to oneself is so important, and it's basically a tenet that I try to live by every single day of my life.
I find it interesting that I feel like being kind to yourself is such an easy thing to say, but such a hard thing to do. And it's great that you're practicing that. And I remember coming from your book, um, I forgot her name, but your high school teacher really called you out and said, not really called you out, but really focused on how whenever you read a book about a villain, you were able to empathize with them and really see the
Mhm.
goodness in their heart. And it's just interesting to me that you have this ability to really see goodness in other people, but being kind to yourself can be so difficult while you can give the benefit of doubt to others so freely. Just an
Yeah, thank you
observation.
so much. It's definitely difficult. I think it's very human, to be tough on ourselves. We hold ourselves to the highest standards, and for me, it's one thing that friends and family have always told me is, you should do what you do for others, give that back to yourself. And so, and maybe part of why I see the goodness in others is because, or I give others the benefit of the doubt is because I too am yearning for that myself. So uh, now I hope, that I will carry those lessons going forward for sure.
Awesome. I have another question from Fuki Tran. Has this journey transformed your literary mindset, and will we see a different form of writing style for your next piece of work?
First, hi, Fu. That's my brother.
Oh, cool.
So a lot of loved ones coming out to support me today. Thank you so much. So yes, this journey has definitely been a transformative one. Absolutely. And, I think it has opened up so many doors for me in terms of where I can take my writing. And so, this first project being a memoir has been wonderful, liberating, but also I had to stay within the confines of truth the entire time that I was writing. And so for my next literary venture, which will be a novel, I'm so excited to embark on this new endeavor where the sky's the limit. I can make up anything I want. Yes, it will be based on the Trunk sisters, but there, first there's only one, I think, primary resource in the world since it was so long ago. So I could really have fun with it and explore different writing styles.
Very cool. I have a question from Sylvie Richards. How has this book contributed to your life, how you see yourself, your family, and the world?
Hi, Sylvia. Joseph's mom.
Ah,
Okay. How has this book contributed to my life? Oh, I think it has contributed to my sense of self. I can now say that I'm a writer, and that is there's so much power in that statement. And so I think being able to lay claim to that part of myself has been invigorating, and it's also been able to help me see to others' dreams too, and see the way that they view themselves, and to want to nurture that within themselves. And so it's really been an incredible journey.
Awesome. I have a question from Farah and Nisbeth. Were there any authors/books that inspired your writing process? And if so, what were they?
I read the same 10 books over and over again. So, and I mentioned two of them already: Maps to Anywhere by Bernard Cooper, Fierce Attachments by Vivian Gornick, and The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Rest in Peace and Power. What else? And I also, I did a lot of memoir research while I was writing this memoir. And so The Best We Could Do by T. Boy, incredible book. The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. And so, yeah, I could definitely, write down a list and send it to you all, or I'll send it to you. Maybe you could pass on the word, but
I could definitely do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one more question from Gabby Treese. I love listening to this from London. Your story reminded me of On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, which I found eye-opening. Is this a comparison you hear often?
Absolutely. It is a comparison I hear often, and I'm so honored to be compared to the inimitable Ocean Vuong. And yeah, I mean, it's there. I think the Vietnamese narrative is one that is, that needs to be brought to light. I feel like Asians are often lumped into a monolith. We think of Asian Americans and we think, maybe East Asian. And so I'm so glad that there are authors now, there's Viet Thanh Nguyen, T. Boy I mentioned before, Monique Trung, Ocean Vuong. And now I'm proud to say myself that I'm really proud of the entire Vietnamese community for really stepping into our power and shedding light on our narratives.
Yeah, it's such a powerful book, and thank you for contributing to this larger amount of Southeast Asian voices. It's really incredible to see someone I know personally become such a prominent author. So I just wanted to close with this little story. In high school, you were on an all-girls robotics team called FE Maidens. FE as in atomic symbol for iron, so Iron Maidens. Really, really funny name, really creative.
Really nerdy.
Super nerdy, but super awesome. We're at Google, so anything nerdy, and also it's like
true.
really, really up-leveling that coolness factor.
Yeah. Our robot was also named Rosie the Riveted. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, extra levels of nerdiness. But anyway, sorry.
Oh no, not at all.
Interrupting you.
It's awesome. And after winning Rookie of the Year in regionals, your team competed in an international competition, ending with a keynote speech from Google's very own co-founder, Sergey Brin. And I'm going to just read a snippet from the book here. In his closing statement was, all of you, right now, right here in the stadium, you are the future. I just wanted to say, while you ultimately chose a different path from STEM, I want to thank you for fulfilling Sergey's prophecy and writing such a beautiful and honest book and adding your voice to the world.
Oh, thank you so much, Jonathan. And thank you, to Google, and to all the viewers today for having me here and for listening. I so appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And we'll be closing this out.
Alrighty.